Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard.
Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Today, friends, we have an interview with a party we have not yet interviewed on this podcast before. So I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say, and it's a big party you've heard about. Today we have Rick Kennedy from the Texas Forward Party, who's going to talk to us about what his party does and what his beliefs are about our political system. So welcome to the podcast, Rick.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for giving me the time.
Rick, we're glad to have you. If we could get started by you kindly giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Sure. I grew up in Massachusetts. I've lived in Texas now since 2006.
Oh, wow.
And like for many folks, the 2016 election was a bit of an eye-opener for me. And I decided to try to do something about our political system, which I thought was fraught with peril, shall we say. And I decided to go big, and I ran for United States Congress in 2018 and 2020. I was a Democratic Party nominee for Congress in the 17th District down here in Texas. And of course, heavily gerrymandered district. It was an R+15 district at the time. No real chance of winning. And the whole experience left me with a bad taste in my mouth, so to speak, about the way our elections are run, the way the parties are conducting themselves. And I walked away at the end of 2020 elections saying never again. And then I heard Andrew start the Forward Party, and even then I wasn't particularly interested until January of 2022 or so. The Texas Forward Party had its first statewide meeting, and it was almost accidental, right? I just checked the calendar. They were having that meeting in a couple of days, and I said, well, I'm not doing anything. I might as well listen in and see what these folks have got going on. And needless to say, the rest is history. I was hooked, and I've been involved ever since.
Okay. So you said you ran for, was it the 17th District?
Correct.
Kindly tell our audience where in Texas that is.
So it has changed since redistricting in 2021. But when I ran, it took in a little sliver of North Austin, very heavily Democratic North Austin. And then expanded way out east to Brazos County, the Bryan College Station area, which includes Texas A&M, kind of wrapped around up to the north to Waco, Texas, and then out into the northeast into a place called Limestone County, Texas. So it's a huge geographical area, about 8,000 square miles.
Limestone County?
Again, a classic gerrymander, right, with a slice of, they were cracking the heavily Democratic Austin area at that point and lumping the slivers of Austin in with the very red rural communities.
Oh, wow, yeah. Yeah, I've lived in Texas for 12 years now, almost 13, but 12 and a half, and I never heard of Limestone County. So I guess that shows how they gerrymandered it.
Yep.
Wow. So you say North Austin. I am in the Northwest Austin area. Did that include Northwest Austin?
No. It was really Northeast Austin, a slice of North Austin, and then through Pflugerville, and then out east from there.
Okay. That gives us an understanding of what that district was like. So there's a lot of alternative parties out there. What makes the Texas Forward Party and the Forward Party in general appealing to you more so than the other alternative parties?
Well, it's pretty simple. I'm an engineer.
Okay.
And, all of that training, and I was kind of born that way, right? But all of that training and everything else, as an engineer, you kind of look for root cause of a problem. And the root cause of the problem, I feel, is the gerrymandering, is the partisan primaries that basically filter out what anybody might consider to be a moderate candidate, and essentially force either one of two extremes onto onto the general electorate in the general election. And the Forward Party is entirely focused on putting reforms in place, such as ranked choice voting, such as nonpartisan primaries, such as citizen drawn districts to eliminate gerrymandering, that would get rid of that root cause and force candidates to actually become more appealing to the general electorate than to the base of their party, which is what we have today. A lot of the other parties, whether it's the Greens or the Libertarians, they originated more from an ideological bent rather than trying to address what I feel is the root cause of the problems.
Okay. That makes sense. And it sounds a lot like the SAM Party, which I understand, I read that it merged into your organization.
That's correct. Back in July of 22, SAM and RAM, the Restore America movement, and Forward all merged into a single organization.
Okay. The reforms you're talking about are a main topic of this podcast. We often interview nonpartisan reform organizations as well as alternative parties, and the ones you mentioned are ones that come up again and again, so people are ripe for change in those regards.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I'm certainly here in Texas more than open to, working with advocacy groups, democracy-oriented groups, as much as we possibly can, even to the point of more mergers, to try to get some critical mass around what we're trying to do here.
Okay. So in addition to the main focus of the election reforms, is the party a typical moderate type party where it wants to, like the SAM organization, I'm familiar with them. I listen to I think I listen to every episode of their podcast when they had it. So I'm familiar with them. So they want to take the best from all over the political spectrum rather than focus on one ideology. Is that, would you say, accurate of how the Forward Party is acting these days?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we very purposefully are not generating a party platform. We're not going to try to force positions top down on candidates. As long as a candidate is dedicated to the core position of implementing ranked choice voting or some other preferential voting system, nonpartisan primaries, basically the electoral reforms that we're looking for that we think will change the incentives that drive the behaviors of our candidates and our representatives. They can establish their own positions on immigration, on abortion, on firearms, on the Second Amendment. And as long as those positions are not, and I'm air quoting here, are not extreme, then they'll be acceptable to the party. And somebody who's got extreme positions probably won't get a party nomination in the first place. So you could very well, it's very possible that in the future we'll have a Forward Party, say, candidate for, or multiple candidates for the same congressional district vying for the party nomination, where one candidate may have a position on that abortion should be legal up to, I'm going to pick a number, 20 weeks. And another candidate may have a position where abortion is legal up to 12 weeks. And those would probably both be acceptable as far as what the party is concerned, and they would then vie for the nomination from their personal positions, not necessarily have to conform to the party's platform. Now we just had a primary here on Tuesday in Texas, and one thing that certainly jumped out at me, the Democratic candidates for my Texas State House district where I live, one was an incumbent, one was a challenger, and I looked at the challenger's positions, and because they have to conform with the Democratic Party position, there was just no daylight in his positions between him and the incumbent. And I kind of questioned the wisdom of even running in a situation like that, because if you can't differentiate yourself, what advantage are you trying to give to the voters that would compel them to, not vote for an incumbent and vote for you? So
Good point.
We want to generate, we want to have differing ideas within the party, so that we, so that candidates are free to form positions that they feel that the majority of the constituency that they want to represent will actually find valuable.
Okay, so I remember from the STAM party, they had the view that some of this was contextual, the positions on issues, because rural communities in Kentucky might be different than New York City for positions on things. So that sounds like that's part of the platform right now, where people can base it off what their constituents feel in the given areas.
That's correct. And I wouldn't even say it's part of the platform. I would say it's the philosophy.
Philosophy, okay. So in regard to these election reforms that you discussed, such as open primaries, ranked choice voting, and redistricting, among others, are you pragmatic in how you want to implement them, or does the party have some strategies it thinks are better to implement these?
Well, both. And I'll speak for Texas because every state is different.
Okay.
I'll speak for Texas specifics. In Texas, the citizens of Texas do not have the right of initiative. We do not have the right to by petition put an initiative on a ballot. And that's probably one of the easiest ways to get ranked choice voting instituted. The folks in Maine, the folks in Alaska went that route because their state constitutions allow them to, again, by petition, get referendum questions on ballots. We don't have that in Texas. We don't have that right in Texas. And what we've seen historically is that there are a lot of advocacy groups like Ranked Choice Voting Texas, like Represent Us, that they work very hard, and they get bills filed in the legislative process, and those bills simply die in committee because the incumbents all benefit from the status quo, and there's no incentive for them to change it, so they're not going to change it. So, our approach, the Forward Party of Texas, our approach is, and our belief is, that we actually have to win elections. We have to get butts in seats, right? We have to have Forward Party or forward aligned Republicans or forward aligned Democrats in the legislature, because that's the only lever of power in the state of Texas to actually get a change like this done.
Okay, that's interesting, because it seems like you have the approach of many of the nonpartisan reform organizations we've interviewed on the podcast, that you have the structure of a political party. So it seems like that's an interesting strategy where you're using the political system as electoral system to get into office and implement the reforms rather than do so from the outside.
That's 100% correct. We think these pro-democracy reform groups, the pressure that they put on legislators, we think this is a necessary part of the solution, but it's not a sufficient part of the solution, at least in the state of Texas. Again, in the state of Texas, if you do not have people sitting in the Texas House and the Texas Senate who are actually going to vote on these things, then we believe you're out of luck. It's just not going to happen. Sure.
So you're mentioning that the Forward Party will accept some, you said, forward-aligned Democrats or Republicans. So that makes me wonder, would you categorize the Forward Party as a fusion party? We don't have fusion voting in Texas, but other states do. So would you categorize the Forward Party as a fusion voting party?
I would characterize this as a pragmatic party, a party that is focused on restoring our democratic processes, and a party that is not ideologically averse to either of the traditional ideologies of the major, at least what we would think of as the moderate wings of the major parties.
Okay. So if they're going to align with the Forward Party, and if they don't join as members, how are you going to be able to control them when they get elected? How are you going to hold them accountable?
Well, that's the key, right? And a candidate can say one thing during the campaign and can align with forward ideals and can, can get an endorsement and can get our support, whether that support is simply an announcement of an endorsement or actual financial support or boots on the ground, people knocking on doors, people making phone calls. If they don't then carry through, and this can happen no matter what, right? If they don't then carry through, then we're going to be running candidates against them in the next cycle, right? And they'll lose that trust, and they'll lose credibility with the voters. We simply won't support them going forward. Believe me, I'm going to express a personal opinion here, very much prefer to have forward party candidates in here rather than forward Republicans or forward Democrats. I think while in some states those alignments can be effective, in the state of Texas, in the current political environment in the state of Texas, I would much rather lean on forward candidates and forward independents rather than forward Republicans and forward Democrats. I just don't think the incentives are there for them to really support what we're trying to do.
Okay. So when's the I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. All good people, right? I mean, no personal character assault there. All good people. Just the incentives and the structures that they're constrained by probably won't align them with us.
Okay. So it's a system issue that it will be hard for anybody's personality, no matter how virtuous of a character they are, to overcome.
Exactly.
So when's the Forward Party of Texas's convention?
We are we're going to have an organizing convention in June of this year. This is not a nominating convention. This is the other barrier. Forward Party of Texas does not have ballot access at the moment.
Oh no.
The barriers to ballot access in Texas are amongst the most onerous in the entire country. And we have a 2-year plan now to gain ballot access in 2026. So between then and now, we have to, again, partner with these advocacy groups, these pro-democracy advocacy groups to get as much synergies as possible working with them, to work side by side with them, to get the word out about what we're trying to do. We need to organize at the ground level. We're going to need boots on the ground to support our candidates, and more importantly, we need boots on the ground to get the 80,000 plus signatures that you need to get in Texas in a short 70-day period in 2026 when the time rolls around to get our candidates on the ballot. So it's an extremely difficult challenge in Texas. Other states it's relatively easy, but if there's one thing Democrats and Republicans agree on is they don't want anybody else on the ballot.
Unfortunately. So given your needs for that, to get people to support you, to get ballot access for the long term, how can our audience help you do that?
First of all, you can volunteer. You can go to www.texasforwardparty.org. You can volunteer your time. If you don't have time, you can volunteer your dollars, right? We're an all-volunteer organization here, and nobody's getting paid at the moment. That may change in the future, but nobody's getting paid at the moment. And folks can help out either with their time or with their money. There's a great deal to get organized at the ground level, especially in a state like Texas with 254 counties. There's a great need for county chairs. There's a great need for precinct chairs. There's a great need for local organizers. And from a money perspective, there's a tremendous need to be able to get data. Data's king, right? Data drives modern campaigns, and getting ballot access is a campaign in and of itself. So, getting the data, getting good data, I should say, is a relatively expensive process. The systems necessary to be able to utilize that data appropriately, to be able to inform and arm your volunteers on the ground to go out and make it happen, it all costs money, right? Even relatively inexpensive channels to get the word out, like social media advertising, at the end of the day, you need some money in the bank to make that happen. So I always say, if you don't have time but you got money, contribute a few bucks. If you don't have money but you got time, sign up and come aboard with us.
Perfect. All right, Rick, it sounds like you got a good thing going with the Texas Forward Party, and we thank you for coming on the podcast today and sharing your vision with our audience.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, wish you all the best with the Forward Party and everything else you do in life.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Bye now.
All right. Bye.